Jake Shields, a former UFC welterweight title contender, had beef with Mike Jackson, the current 170-pound bruiser, because of an argument on Twitter, resulting in a confrontation inside the UFC Performance Center in LA last week. The heated conversation soon turned into a physical contest, resulting in Shields earning himself an aggravated assault charge as well as an instant lifetime ban from the UFC PI. Here's everything we know about the confrontation so far. Starting off with online beef. The two fighters have had a tense online relationship that ended up turning physical at the UFC PI. The 43-year-old Shields shared a video of the altercation on his Twitter account on Friday, the 16th of December. The footage shows him on top of Jackson outside of the cage while several people around them try to break up the scuffle. In the caption, posted along with the video, Shields writes, "Finally ran into the Mike Jackson," stating that Jackson quickly discovered the difference between calling someone a on the internet versus in the real world, and how lucky he was to have people around him to, quote, save his pathetic racist. Jackson was instructed to contact authorities and file charges against Shields for the attack, later talking about the altercation in an interview with MMA Junkie, where he explained that UFC staff had informed him that Shields had been banned from ever returning to the PI. He also went on to say that his attacker had also been spreading rumors that he had thrown the first punch, which wasn't true, as the video clearly shows how he returned none of Shields' advances. To be fair, it was an extremely decision on Shields' part. Not only has he effectively ruined any chances for him to advance in the UFC, but he's also cemented himself as the guy who throws temper tantrums over a few words on the internet. It's like the great DJ Khaled once said, "Congratulations, you played yourself." However, this isn't the first time Shields has been involved in an altercation in the PI. Back in September, while Shields was working out with fellow UFC fighter Paulo Costa, Khamzat Chimaev confronted the middleweight contender Paulo Costa while surrounded by his crew, without any real intention of getting into a fight. According to Shields, he'd been there all morning going over drills and techniques when all of a sudden, Khamzat approached the two, along with around 10 people from his entourage, and started yelling at them, asking if Paulo wanted to fight him. He went on to say that he was worried that they were all about to jump them, but then felt as if he had just been putting on a show for the cameras rather than actually having any intention of turning the altercation physical. Shields explained that Chimaev had probably been upset at Paulo for calling him a fake gangster, and decided that the best way to respond to that claim was to show up with a whole team behind him in order to make himself look tough, exactly what a fake gangster would do. We can't help but agree with his claim, since it sounds more like a hold me back situation to us. On the other hand, Shields isn't the first UFC fighter to have received a lifetime ban from the sport. MMA is a pretty cutthroat industry, with fighters regularly being dropped from their respective promotions due to poor work ethic and performance, such as losing 3 times in a row. However, that's not the only way you can lose your job in this sport, as there have been many cases of contracts being torn up for various other forms of infractions, such as drug violations. There were quite a few fighters who have been banned from the UFC for life as well, with Dana White, the president of the promotion himself, admitting that they'll never be allowed to fight for him again. Let's take a look at some of them, shall we? First up, we have Paul Semtex Daly. Daly used to be a rising star in 2010, but after an incident at UFC 113 in Montreal, a furious Dana White banned him for life. After losing his welterweight bout against Josh Koscheck, he decided to sucker punch Koscheck after the bells had already rung. So far, White has stuck to his word and has refused to allow Semtex to step back in the promotion, saying he didn't care whether Daly ended up becoming a world-renowned fighter, he wasn't going to ever fight in the UFC again. He currently is signed with Bellator, where he holds a career record of 42-17-2. Next up, there's Rousimar Palhares. Just like Daly, Palhares was also told that he'd never fight in the UFC again because of his unsportsmanlike conduct inside the octagon. The Brazilian fighter had a history of making his opponents tap out, but refused to release them even when the bells had rung. Back in 2010, he even got suspended for 90 days after his win at UFC 111 over Tomas Derval because he refused to let go of a heel hook. However, the final straw came in 2013 when he submitted Mike Pierce in 31 seconds back in 2013. But you guessed it, once again refused to let let go, resulting in White handing him an instant ban from all future events. Following up is Matt Riddle. Riddle had managed to have a 4-fight win streak in the UFC before ending up testing positive for 2 separate drugs, which also put an end to his career in the UFC. Despite not officially being banned, White himself said that he would never be coming back. Riddle would later move into the world of wrestling and is currently performing in NXT after being signed by the WWE. A fitting end since he won't be needing any drugs while throwing fake punches. Moving on, there's Ruslan Magomedov. The Russian heavyweight got his ban handed to him after receiving multiple doping violations. He got his first warning in 2016, getting a 2-year ban after testing positive for a selective androgen receptor modulator designed to help promote muscle growth. His second warning came in October 2018 when he tested positive for 2 steroid metabolites. The third and final straw came in February of the following year after he refused to give a sample for testing. Considering his responses, we suppose the results would have been pretty obvious. Coming up next is Jason High. White is very strict when it comes to infractions committed after the bell or having any altercations with referees, and it was the latter that had gotten High his ban after shoving the match's referee, Kevin Mulhall, after a disagreement over a TKO stoppage during his fight against Rafael Dos Anjos back in 2014. White revealed that his reasoning was quite simple: never touch a referee ever, and that even though High had been apologizing to fans on Twitter, his time in the UFC was over. At the halfway point of our list, Thiago Silva. This UFC veteran had been cut from the promotion because of a serious criminal offense where he'd allegedly threatened his estranged wife with a firearm in Florida, which resulted in a 4-hour standoff with SWAT before the fighter eventually surrendered. Following his arrest, White announced that Silva would never be fighting in the UFC again because of the incident, and despite the fact that all criminal charges had later been dropped, he still never found a place in the promotion again. BJ Penn makes his way into our list as well. Penn used to be a legend in the UFC, even being the former lightweight champion, originally competing in the promotion back in 2001, while also helping a lot with increasing the sport's popularity. Considering the fact that he hasn't had a single win since 2010, should have warranted a ban, but it was a later incident that led to the decision after videos emerged of the 41-year-old getting involved in a street fight in Hawaii, causing Dana to put his foot down. Moving on, we have Vanderlei Silva. Silva was banned by the Nevada State Athletic Commission after running away from a random drug test in 2014, and despite his lifetime ban eventually being overturned, his later comments about the UFC and fight fixing earned him his second permanent lifetime ban. Next up, there's Jonathan Copenhaver. Unfortunately, the War Machine is known more for action outside the octagon rather than in it. He had fought in only 2 UFC bouts before getting banned after he turned down a fight and made several insensitive comments about the tragic death of Evan Tanner. But it just kept getting worse as he then later got charged with a felony after he assaulted his girlfriend, Christy Mack, which resulted in a 36-year prison sentence. Heading into the top 3s, we have Randy Couture. Couture used to be a favorite of White and is still the most decorated UFC champion to date, beating every well-known UFC fighter in the late 2000s and early 2010s. Unfortunately, after he retired from the UFC, the fighter decided to sign a contract with Spike, one of the main competitors of the promotion, which brought about White's anger. Couture was even banned from cornering his son, Ryan Couture, in his UFC bout back in 2013, and went on to explain that Randy wouldn't even be allowed to buy a ticket for the UFC if he wanted to. The penultimate entry on our list is Khalib Starnes. Starnes appeared to have a promising career in the UFC. However, his very first bout in the promotion at UFC 38 would earn him the nickname Running Man, after spending 3 rounds doing nothing except running away from his opponent, Nate Query. Although he was immediately cut from the UFC's roster, he still went on to fight for other promotions and has had a pretty solid career so far. A shame he couldn't show his skills in the octagon. And finally, there's Jason Mayhem Miller. Miller had already been known to be a hothead before coming to the UFC and didn't seem to really fit in. However, he still got a chance to become a coach at The Ultimate Fighter, which he then lost to Michael Bisping in the finale, followed by another loss to CB Dollaway. White eventually let him go, stating that the clown was done for good at the UFC. When asked to elaborate on his statement, Dana replied by saying that something had happened backstage that he didn't wish to talk about. That's a wrap for this video. What are your thoughts on the Jake Shields and Mike Jackson situation? And do you think his ban was justified? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.